Hello everybody and welcome back. I'm Chase.
And I'm Joby.
That is the 2023 Mercedes-AMG C43 sedan, and this is the Overrun. Okay, so what is the C43 sedan? Now, it's worth noting that this is the C43 and not the C63, so please don't spend all week thinking that this used to have a V8 like I did. Instead, what this used to have in 2022 was a really big twin-turbo V6. Now, that's all gone and replaced with a turbocharged four-cylinder. We'll get to that in a minute. What does matter is the money for the moment, and the money is as follows. This starts at $59,900. However, the car you see here is quite a lot more expensive. As a matter of fact, it is, well, near as makes no difference, $12,000 more expensive. Our total as stickered price today is $72,630. It's a lot of money, but in the grander world of entry-level sports sedans, it's actually not too terrible, and there's quite a lot of competition to talk about.
Now, under the hood of the Mercedes, what is this? Let me restart that. Under the hood of the C43 AMG is a 2-liter turbocharged inline-4 with a mild hybrid system, which produces 402 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, which is plenty, and that is also paired to a 9-speed automatic transmission. And this car specifically has all-wheel drive and rear steer, which is very cool. But looking actually underneath the engine, it's actually a really nice engine bay in here. You can actually see the fairly large turbo right here. And in typical AMG fashion, there's a little badge right on the engine cover that tells you exactly where this fine engine, or who this fine engine was handcrafted by. And in this case, it was handcrafted by Hendrik Milktray. I don't know. Hendrik Milktray. Thank you for producing this fine piece of automotive engineering. We certainly appreciate that. But it is a very nice engine bay in here. Like I said, you can see the turbo, and this engine cover is quite nice. But yeah, that's all for the powertrain and engine.
Okay, now let's talk design. Obviously, Mercedes has brought back the 4-door shape for the 2023 and forward model year, which means there's, 4 whole doors. Starting at the front, it has the sort of Mercedes-AMG Panamericana type grille. We got a nice little AMG badgie here, and some associated cameras for the system. The driver assist. I like these headlights. I think they look pretty neat. They have a cool little smooth yet aggressive look, which I think really suits the overall vibe of this car. Smooth but aggressive, right? What I'm not such a fan of are these wheels. I don't really know what is going on with this right here. It sounds like plastic, and I think I could even, maybe you can pull them off and make the wheels better, but they make the wheel look a little too chunky, and I would prefer it to be a little more spokey. And then moving down the side, there's this turbo electrified badge that lets you know that Lewis Hamilton's Formula One car is living under the hood, even though he hates that car. And then moving down the side, there's a nice little strip here, which I think helps accent the shape of the car nicely. And then really from here back, it's just S-Class in profile. It looks very, very Mercedes. And then around the back, there's some more interesting AMG bits. Of course, we've got some badging, let you know what you've bought. Big diffuser. I'm actually kind of a fan of how large the strakes on the diffuser are, and the exhaust outlets. I think it looks nice and aggressive. It doesn't look too wide from the back. Unlike some of the higher grade AMG models, you don't get that blistered giant fender look. There's some fake vents around here, and then of course, well, it's really just going to be the same around the back, but we're going to do a loop anyway. I don't know. I think it's a good design. I think this lunar blue metallic paint is pretty nice. It's worth the money. I don't know. It's a handsome design. It's a nice looking small sedan. It's certainly a lot smoother than something like the RS3 or the Lexus IS500, both of which this competes with, which we're going to talk about here in a second.
Let's go ahead and talk about competition. I'll go ahead and get us started, and I want to talk about the RS3 from Audi, which almost basically is this car's direct competitor. It produces 401 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, which is literally almost exactly the same as this car, except it's significantly cheaper. I built one on Audi's configurator, and it came out to just over $66,000, which obviously has all-wheel drive. It doesn't have rear steer like this car does, but other than that, it's practically fully loaded unless you wanted to get some like carbon options from Audi. But crucially, it has a 5-cylinder turbocharged engine, which I would wager to bet that most of you would find that much more interesting than the 2-liter hybrid turbo engine that's found in here. Obviously, turbo 5-cylinders are super sick, and that RS3 sounds fantastic, especially if you throw a fun exhaust on it. But yeah, overall, I think what we would rather do with our money is what Chase is about to say.
Yeah, so why get a 4-cylinder when you could have had a V8? As we all know, the Lexus IS 500 is also sitting in this space. It starts really close to this car's $59,900 MSRP. The IS 500 starts at $60,020 per car and driver. So for only, quite literally only a few more dollars, you can have a V8 with 472 horsepower and, I can't believe I'm saying this, a slightly larger car. Dimensionally, the RS3 and this are very close. The IS 500, however, is just a little bit bigger, which, if you're buying a sports sedan, you might appreciate the rear legroom, as we're going to find out later. So, as we mentioned, because of this car's sizing, you're going to sacrifice in the rear legroom department. I'm sitting behind myself right now, and I'm kind of short, so I have room, right? I actually have a lot of knee room, I have a lot of room for my feet, but I'm definitely losing some headroom. The crown of my head is right next to this pillar right here, so if someone gets a little saucy on the on-ramp, that's not going to be fun, although there is a good amount of bolstering right here. Now, it's also worth noting that the C43 adds some nice luxury features. That also includes this very nice leather interior, which I actually am not a very big fan of. I think that both Audi and Lexus offer much nicer leather in their cars. Mercedes leather just feels really plasticky to me. But let's keep it with the rear seats for now. What this does have is quad zone climate control, so I can actually mess with my own climate controls down here and cool myself off because I am just roasting right now. There's also my own little moon roof, which I can open up if I'd like to work on my tan. And I have a little armrest here with, I think, some cup holders. Oh, I know what this is for. This is for, no, it's for a pen. You can put a pen there. I don't really know where you're supposed to put cups back here. There's no cup holders in the door pockets. I guess they're big enough for a small water bottle. There's a small cutout in there, but it's okay. I think if I had to spend a few hours back here, I'd be all right. But just like the RS3, I'm eventually going to want a little bit more room, which is kind of where the IS 500 comes in. Now let's go up front and talk more about what this interior is like in functionality. Okay, I think the best way to do this is start with what I like. What I like is the sizing of the interior. I feel like I have a decent amount of room in here. The seats are very adjustable. I have backrest, length adjustment, lumbar support, anything that I would ordinarily expect from a luxury car at this price point, which I think speaks to the kind of vibe in here. It feels very luxury car. Mercedes far and away has the best ambient lighting, which is like $10,000 of luxury feelingness, if you ask me. However, what I don't like is pretty much everything else. Let's start with build quality. I think that this is extremely poor build quality. Let's start with this. This floating armrest, I can flex with my hands without really even trying. And the other day when I got out of the car, I put my arm on the door and it made a really concerning creaky, snappy sound. Speaking of creaky, snappy sounds, there's a lot of them in this interior. There's some sort of creak from up here in the vent cluster. Let's see if I can, yeah, I don't know if you can hear. It's really bad, okay? We're just gonna leave the mic off, screw it. The infotainment, while usable and very responsive, you can do pretty much whatever you want on here without having that much of a problem, is a little distracting. It's hard to use. We have talked ad nauseum about how much better physical controls are. That's much the same in here because the steering wheel is also covered in a bunch of crappy haptics that are frankly just really frustrating to use. It's very difficult to figure out what the haptics are doing and when they're doing them because there's no positive feedback. Anyways, let's move on. I don't find the seats to be particularly comfortable despite how adjustable they are either. I spent maybe 2.5 hours in here the other day. Not so great. They also don't offer enough bolstering for like real performance driving, which is something we'll talk about more in the drive impressions. I'm not a big fan of the piano black. I think that this wood plastic trim up here It just sounds cheap, it feels cheap, it looks cheap. It's worth pointing out that this is the entry-level AMG model. So, as you climb the trim hierarchy and get into the C63, some of the other AMG models, these interiors improve quite a lot, but it's also worth pointing out that the RS3 has a fantastic interior and a much more usable infotainment system. And while we're on the subject of infotainment once more, I want to talk about this Burmester sound system. It's acceptable, and acceptable is kind of where I draw the line. The IS500 is the benchmark in this segment. The Mark Levinson sound system in pretty much any Lexus product is leaps and bounds ahead of anything that you're going to find from Mercedes or Audi. And with that in mind, I think that I have been mean about the interior long enough, and it's time to find out what it's like to drive this car.
Just before we get into our driving impressions, I just want to quickly go over the cargo space here in the C43. It's a sedan, so obviously it has all the same sedan drawbacks, but it's actually pretty deep in here. We got a couple of backpacks like we always do, and you could fit, I don't know, probably a good 3 or 4 fairly large suitcases back here. One cool feature is you can actually drop the rear seats just using a switch right here, which is nice. And then there's, let's see what's under here. Actually, I haven't looked yet. Actually, there's a pretty good amount of cargo space, extra stuff right there. There's no full-size spare in here. Just, you know, obviously don't beat up one of your wheels and you'll be just fine. But yeah, decent cargo space. Again, just like pretty much every other sort of sedan of this size on the market right now.
Okay, well, apologies for the crap camera angle. Joby and possibly myself may or may not have left the GoPro case with the car mounts on the trunk lid somewhere in Denver. If you find a black GoPro case in a parking lot,
could be ours.
DM us.
Anyways, let's move on to the actual reason why we're here and why the camera is on, and that's to give you the drive impressions of the C43. I guess I'll start. I don't know. There's a lot of power here. I mean, it's 402 horsepower. Obviously, that's quite a bit, especially if this is your first, 400 plus horsepower car. I mean, you might even be overwhelmed by that figure.
It feels like a lot.
Yeah.
Even when everything else in this segment is at or above 400.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's more than enough. The seats are, Chase mentioned this in the interior, but the seats are absolutely, I would say, atrocious at pace, like driving at pace. You're moving around.
There's no lateral support.
Nothing.
For my thighs.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a little bit of bolstering on the sides.
Yeah, but mainly...
I'm constantly holding myself up.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And you're constantly having to fight to keep yourself even, like kind of in this bend, you can kind of maybe see it. But yeah, it's okay. It's decent on the highway, I'd say. It's a little loud in here, a little louder than I would expect at this price point at least.
But that's, I think, PS4S tires, 265 rear section tires, 245 at the front.
Yeah.
And this starts as an economy car. So
yeah.
Some of the road noise is to a point forgivable at a $60-ish thousand price point. My problem with the road noise is just that the Lexus is quieter, and while we haven't driven the Audi RS3, I spent hundreds upon hundreds of miles in an S3 last year, which was demonstrably quieter.
Yeah, also, speaking of noise, you can't really hear the engine at all. It's very, very quiet from an engine point of view or perspective in here, which in a performance car is not great, I would say. So
no, there's also, like, I don't get induction noise, nothing. If you throw it into the crazy super kill mode, right, you get pops and bangs out of the exhaust. The exhaust is really, really loud.
Yeah, it is.
Which is funny because you just don't hear a lot of that in the cabin.
Yeah.
I get that this is kind of straddling luxury and sport, but like, so does everything else in the segment, and you can't have a 400 horsepower powertrain in this segment and have it not also be engaging, because you have the straight six in the BMWs, you have the Turbo 5, and then of course the V8, right? And that's our biggest problem, right?
Yeah.
Is the V8, the IS500 is the elephant in this room.
Yep, absolutely, especially when it comes in so much cheaper than this.
And everybody makes excuses. I think this is the big problem with this car. Everybody makes excuses for the IS500's transmission because it's an automatic, it's a torque converter. Everybody says it's not very good. I like it better than this transmission.
Absolutely.
How about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a little slower, definitely, but this transmission...
the ups on this are really, really fast.
Yeah, this transmission, its profile is just weird. I don't know, there was plenty of times where it should have upshifted when we've been up here in the mountains, and it just stayed in gear.
And in lower gears.
Yeah.
It jumps around a lot. It feels like it's loading the clutch or clutches up and then not doing anything with them. There's just a lot of gap between what your right foot tells the car and what the transmission does, which is not the hallmark of a good enthusiast car. Generally, I would argue that this driving experience is not the hallmark of a good enthusiast car in any way. I would hope that the 63 is better, but who knows?
Yeah.
I have very little positive to say about this driving experience, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think it's, yeah, if it's your first performance-oriented car, it'd be probably good for you, but if you've driven anything else with this type of power and sort of even just in this segment, I think you'd be pretty underwhelmed getting into this thing.
Yeah, 100%. So with that in mind, I think that we have been mean enough. It's probably time to wrap her up. So we are going to pull over and do that.
Yeah.
With only part of our camera gear. Okay, let's wrap her up.
Don't lean on the car. You're not a real enthusiast if you lean on the car. That was one of the many lovely comments that we got on one
really
of our...
funny.
It was funny.
That was really funny.
Anyways, let's finish up our review of the C43. I was about to say E63 because that's probably what I'd rather be driving.
Well, I've been calling it the C63 all week, so...
Yeah, well... Yeah.
Anyways, here's the deal. This car, isolated on its own, in a vacuum, is a perfectly competent performance sedan.
Well, speaking of performance sedans, let's see which one is... it's a bike. Never mind.
As you can tell, we got up here a little late. It's a perfectly competent performance sedan.
Yeah.
Evaluated in a vacuum. And then you drive everything else in the segment, or you get close to driving it in the case of the RS3 S3 conundrum we have here. And well, it just doesn't stack up, especially when there's a naturally aspirated V8 available for the same or less money, depending on how this is optioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really have anything else. I just think that it's another performance sedan from Mercedes. It's just another thing that they've slapped their AMG badge on and just said, hey, it's more money. It's AMG now. More power, F1. And they've kind of just thrown all these random buzzwords out to make it seem a little bit more exciting than it actually is. And yeah, that's kind of what I think. Yeah,
I mean, the last thing I'll say about the powertrain is I think that if your pitch to me as an enthusiast for the 43 and the 63 to an extent is, hey, look, we downsized the motors, but Lewis Hamilton lives in the turbocharger, F1 technology, there's an electric motor on the impeller, it's more responsive, it's more engaging. These are all words that are used in the press kit. And if your pitch to me is that, then why can't I hear the powertrain? And more to the point, why am I more interested in the other powertrains in the market? So,
and lastly, why is there no DRS?
Yeah, there's no DRS. And I think what really illustrates our point more than anything is what we did on our way up here. And I'll show you. That is my $11,000 Porsche Boxster. I drove that rather than drive the C43.
Yeah.
That's it. So with that in mind,
remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this.
Please do. If you want to see us review an RS3 or the new IS500 or whatever else, remember to do that. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.